Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing another installment in my repurchase or not videos that I have going on here on my channel. It is where I pick 10 palettes out of my collection and tell you about their journey in my collection, how they came about in my collection, and would I repurchase them today if they came available today for me to purchase. Some of them are still available today for me to purchase, but if I hadn't purchased them way back when, even some of them are pretty recent, would I still purchase them today knowing what I know now? Some are yes, some are no. With that said, hello, hi. For those of you new, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here on my channel. But ultimately, I'm just out here talking about makeup because I love to talk about makeup. And I'm assuming if you're here, you also like to talk about makeup. So let's just jump in. Alright, so I have several palettes, and of all of the palettes in my collection to randomize and pull from, somehow this go around I ended up with two Morphe palettes, and they're the biggest Morphe palettes that I have in my collection. I am not a huge fan of Morphe, but I think that you would be surprised with the outcome of this. So I have both the James Charles Artistry palette and the Such a Gem Artistry palette, I do believe. This one is the James Charles palette, and I purchased it when it first came out. I haven't purchased Morphe in a very long time. I do get Morphe in gratis a lot. Morphe is something that is carried in Ulta Beauty, and I get Morphe in gratis a lot. But I did purchase this way back when it first came out, and I was, incredibly excited about this palette when it first came out because it had a range within it that didn't exist in my collection really. I had rainbow palettes and I had neutral palettes, but I didn't really have a whole lot of palettes that had all the colors I needed from a neutral aspect and all the colors I wanted from a colorful aspect. I've gotten a lot of usage out of it, if I'm honest. It was one of the palettes that I reviewed in my palette roulettes. I do love this giant row of neutrals in the center for you to pull from for anything that you want to do, really, as it pertains to like even contour or bronzer, highlight if you wanted to do that. I love that it's a mostly matte eyeshadow palette. I wouldn't repurchase this palette, mostly because, number one, I just don't support Morphe from a ultimate foundations of makeup standpoint. I do not think that even for their price point, they're fantastic. I do think that they're good for beginners because they allow you to build up a makeup collection that could be enormous for a really decent price point. I also do think that they have mattes that are very buildable instead of straight up pigmentation. I wouldn't repurchase this one because these are pressed pigments, so they do have some really great pigmentation to them, but they blend out for poop. And I have other pressed pigments in my collection that are the same colors that blend out beautifully. So I know that this just isn't where it's at for pressed pigment standpoint. Some of the shimmers in this palette are really beautiful. I think this one is a gorgeous shimmer. This one is a really pretty shimmer. I do love this red here because I do find that it is really truly a red, shows up as a red on my face. And I also really, really love this white here. It was wonderful for like brow bone highlight or whatever I wanted to do with it. But it's just a palette that goes largely unused in my palette collection, even though it's got like the very baseline standards of a rainbow palette should, in addition to all the neutrals that you need. I have smaller palettes with better formulas with this same color story, so to speak, but on a more condensed or edited version of it. So I would not repurchase this one. However, I would repurchase this one. This is the Morphe Such a Gem, and I just had such a great time with this eyeshadow palette. It is purples and pinks, and I love purples and pinks, and everything in here was just beautiful. The only one that I didn't really get any usage out of is this one here, and that's because it's a pressed glitter, and Y'all know how I feel about glitters, so there's that. But I do think that I had a lot of fun with this palette. Had some really great eye looks show up from this palette. Every single one of the shimmers in here is really truly beautiful. These middle ones feel like a super shock shadow. They're really creamy. They go on one swipe. They're just beautiful and pretty impactful in an eye look. And I really just love this eyeshadow palette. So this one I would repurchase. The next one I have in here is the Ellie Girl Festy Bestie. Now this is rather recent to my collection. As we all know, this just launched not that long ago from Ellie Girl. Actually, it maybe was a year ago. Maybe, but I don't even think it's been that long. If I can be 100% honest, I think it was earlier this year. This is what the palette looks like, and it looks like it should be right up my alley. It looks like it's a palette that I would get down for. I hated this palette. It really, really was a disappointment. I love Ellie Girl. Their eyeliners are some of my favorite eyeliners. Their eyeshadows, I have to say, just are not, they're not cutting it for me. I definitely would not repurchase this. I have better in my collection. There was a couple that I would pull out if I could, like depot them. But then, like, thinking through my palette collection and what I have in my palette collection, I honestly think this one could go in entirety, and I would be missing nothing. The next one I have is the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. And this one would stay for one reason and one reason only, the pure nostalgia of this palette. I remember when this Too Faced collection was, first being launched, and all that like sneak peek videos that were out there, and I wanted this collection so bad. And when it finally launched, I sat there and hemmed and hawed about it for so long that I ended up missing the boat on a couple of the things that I would have been able to get with the Sweet Peach collection, but I ended up getting on there in time to get most of the Sweet Peach collection. I got this and the trio that had the blush and the bronzer and the highlight in it. I also got all of the lip oils that they had at the time. And there was a couple other things. Oh, the Papa Don't Peach blush, which was in my collection forever. There's a couple other things other than that I got. But this one is just a plain Jane palette, but smells like peaches. It smells so good. It pulls at my heartstrings. So this will never leave my collection because of the nostalgia of it, because of the fond memories I have of the time when this was coming to the table. But if it were to launch today, which is actually the question, I would not pick this up. It has been years since I purchased anything palette-wise from Too Faced. I just do not find that their eyeshadows suit me very much. Like, they're basic, sure, but they're just not good. They're just not. I would say that they maybe are a step above Morphe, if not worse than Morphe. I feel like Morphe gives you a little bit more than Too Faced does, if I'm honest, and that is so sad for me to say, because man, I have some really fond memories of this palette, and I love this palette, and it will remain in my collection forever. But that's how I feel about the potential of purchasing it today if it was just launching today. Now this one, the Sigma Enchanted, I think I go back and forth with on it, because while I love it and it's pretty, I just don't find a whole lot of reasons to pull for it. And it's kind of got a lot more shimmers than it does mattes, and the mattes don't make sense for the shimmers in my humble opinion. But this palette is really, really beautiful. But it is also a palette that just doesn't make sense, to be honest. I think if it were to launch today, I probably would not purchase this, because I like a palette that is 50-50 matte to shimmer ratio, and because I feel like I've got a lot of these shimmers in my collection better than what's in this palette. Now, even if I didn't know what I know about this palette, it just doesn't scream to my soul in the way today that it did many, many years ago. I love this palette. Do not get me wrong, I love this palette so much, but I just don't think I would pick it up today. I mean, of the, 14 shades that are in here, 6 of them are mattes. And these 5 are the mattes plus this one here. And they just don't make sense to the shimmers that are in here. And I think that that's why I have such a hard time with this palette. Now, picked up as an individual, like always going to be a companion palette, sure, I would pick this up. But I wouldn't even bat an eye at it if it launched today. The next one I have is finally one that I know that I would pick up again, and that is the Kaleidos Escape Pod. This actually ranked in as my favorite palette of last year, I do believe. This is what it looks like. Very colorful, but also has some really nice like neutral tones down here. These shimmers in this palette are stunning, and this is cohesive and makes sense to one another. Like this green could go with any of these colors, this green could go with any of these colors, but all of these colors could also go with the bright colors up at the top. This is definitely a cohesive matte to shimmer palette. It's a 50-50 mix. It's a beautiful, beautiful formula, super impactful, really, really eye-catching, beautiful palette. I would definitely purchase this one again. I purchased this one because it was on my list, but I purchased it alongside the Angelica Nyquist collab with Kaleidos, that first one that she had with Kaleidos, because I wanted to try the brand, and I love Angelica Nyquist, and I wanted free shipping. So I purchased this on a whim, and I couldn't be happier that I purchased it. And the next one I have is the Zulu by Juvia's Place. So Juvia's Place is a brand that my daughter got me interested in, and I love the artwork on their palettes. It's always so beautiful. This is what this palette looks like, and tell me this is not a bright, colorful, beautiful palette. I love this palette, but I also think that while I am a color wearer, I don't know that I would pick this up today. And the biggest reason why is because a lot of these colors are not colors that I wear on my face. I love this bottom row here, but this second row, never. I never pull for those colors to go onto my face. This top row is actually beautiful. You know, thinking through the lens of what I look at when I purchase a palette, I do think that if this was just coming on the market today, I would definitely side-eye it. I might think about it for a minute, but as soon as I got to play with it, yeah, I think I'd repurchase it. I'm changing my mind just on a whim, just changing my mind. I do think that I would purchase this if it was launched today, just because of how I feel about color, and because it does have like that orange and brown and yellow. That top row I do think is universal and can be worn any day, anyway. So I would probably repurchase this palette. The next one is the TARDIS Pro Remix, and this was a palette that launched because the first palette in this way was such a success. But I think the first palette in this way was such a success because it was the basics that we know that we can trust and love from Tarte, and that is mostly matte with a few shimmers. This one is mostly shimmers with a few mattes. There's 1, 2, 3 mattes in this palette, and the rest are shimmer. I would not repurchase this palette. When I saw this palette online, I think I was enamored by the packaging and just like how it moved and how it changed as you like looked at it. Like, I am a sucker for packaging sometimes. I think it smells divine. It still has this like vanilla chocolate scent, and it's so, so good. But ultimately, when you take this apart and you look at this as an individual, you know, palette per, you know, shade by shade, there's only 3 mattes in this palette, and there are 20 shadows in this palette. This will never be a standalone palette in anybody's collection that I know of, and the shimmers just aren't that great. Like, even in the first palette, the shimmers were really good. The shimmers in this one are just not that great, and there's no specialty to it. This one here is like the duochrome of it, but it's like that red, green, blue type of, you know, shift, and it's not special. It's just not special. I definitely wouldn't repurchase this palette. And at the time that I bought this, I also think I was super enamored by Tarte, that like anything Tarte did, I was like there for. So I definitely wouldn't repurchase this one either. The next one I have on here is the Vanessa Myricks Experience palette. Now, I did purchase this, and I purchased it not that long ago. I purchased it because I have been hearing some really great things about Vanessa Myricks for a while now, and I really just wanted to experience Vanessa Myricks, and this was the Lightwork Volume 3 Experience palette. And I do think that if this were launching today, I would purchase this. God, these are beautiful, beautiful duochromes with that, or multichromes. With that said, I do have better ones in my collection from Cleona, but man, for mainstream multichromes, this is truly the best of the best. It's better than you're gonna get from Pat McGrath. If I'm honest, I prefer her over Pat McGrath for the most part, and I would definitely repurchase this. What I love most about this is these 2 shades down here are cream, so you put them on like a gloss over the top of your eye, and then it changes any one of these that you put over the top of it, and it helps those stick to your eyelid. Like, it's just such a beautiful palette. I have a review on all of these palettes on my in my palette roulette series, so I will for sure stick the video that I did of this palette in the cards for you to go watch. I swatched them all. I show you the eye looks I was able to create in all these palette roulettes, but such a beautiful palette. So yes, I would definitely repurchase that one, even though it's an $85 palette. The last one I have is the Odin's Eye Sea Talk palette. So if this were to launch today, I would tell you, yes, I would purchase it again. Biggest reason why is because I love Lauren May. I stan her. I watch almost every single one of her videos. I'm not a part of her second channel, her fragrance channel, but mostly because I have a ton of fragrances. They're mostly still in boxes. I don't use fragrance like she does. I don't get into the notes. I don't know anything about fragrance to speak of, but I love her so much. She's such a creative mind and has a lot of things to bring to this space. With that said, that is not the only reason. This is the shadows in this palette, and while I don't wear blue very often, these blues go so, so well with all of the other shades in this palette. It can be a standalone palette. It can be also a companion palette. This is probably one of my favorite chartreuse greens. It is just such a beautiful palette and surprising. This pink was surprising to me. This like kind of slatey blue purple was surprising to me. This was even a super surprising shade in that it was just such a beautiful like lavender grayish taupe, which was stunning in any eye look I put it into. I would definitely repurchase this palette, even though it's not got like, I mean, those 6 are the colors that I absolutely couldn't do without, but some of these I also really, really love as well as a single one and done eyeshadow look. So I would definitely purchase this again. This collaboration between her, Butte Bean, and Makeup Just for Fun, I think, was my first venture into Odin's Eye, and I could not be happier. And I did buy the like bundle that came with all the ribbons and stuff because I had to have it, and I am happy that I purchased it. So with that said, we had 10 palettes to go through today, 5 of which I would not repurchase again, and 5 of which I would repurchase again, and I'm a little shocked at myself to see a Morphe palette in there. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Do you have any of these palettes, and how do you feel about these palettes in your collection? I would certainly be interested in hearing your thoughts and opinions. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you and yours are well, that summer is treating you great, that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best you can, and that you are all loving each other but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.